Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Both Stephen with a PH and B. Demon sent me this story, and it's reported in a variety of places. But this is interesting because we talked before about the rights you have against searches and seizures inside the United States. But the question always is, what happens at the borders? And courts have on occasion said, well, the border is a different situation because if you're coming into the country before you're inside the country, you might not have the same rights you'd have once you're inside because the government has this compelling interest to protect what comes into the country. And so some law enforcement authorities have used that as an excuse to say, oh, hand me your phone, let me go through your phone and unlock it, please, or go through your laptop and so on, and just on a fishing expedition. And so, interestingly, a federal court has now just said, no, that's not how that works. So this is from the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University, KNIGHT, the Knight First Amendment Institute. Federal court says warrant required for device searches at the border. A federal court has ruled that the government must obtain a warrant based on probable cause before searching travelers' electronic devices at the border. I am only chuckling at the based on probable cause because that's what everybody's been saying is don't they need, some kind of reason or maybe a warrant? The court says, yeah, you need both. You need both. The ruling came in a case in which a criminal defendant moved to suppress evidence obtained from a search of his cell phone when he came into the U.S. at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. In October of 23, the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia and the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press filed an amicus brief in the case arguing that warrantless searches of travelers' phones violate the First Amendment's protection of the freedoms of the press, speech, and association, as well as the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. And the judge relied heavily on the amicus brief in issuing her ruling. Now, some people are going to say, but Steve, how would you know that? How would you know what the court based its opinion on? Well, quite often, you submit a brief to the court and you cite a bunch of cases. And the opposition files a brief with the court and cites a bunch of cases. And you find out that in the final opinion, the court cites a bunch of the cases that you cited. And occasionally I've seen where they actually borrowed language or even said things such as appellant notes, and then they quote it. So here, as the court recognizes, warrantless searches of electronic devices at the border are an unjustified intrusion into travelers' private expressions, personal associations, and journalistic endeavors. Activities of First and Fourth Amendments were designed to protect, says senior counsel at the Knight First Amendment Institute. The ruling makes clear that border agents need a warrant before they can access what the Supreme Court has called a window into a person's life. And, think about what's on your phone these days. In the old days, they could look at your phone and go, oh, you've got numbers stored in here. Gee, whose numbers are these? Now they can literally get your phone and go, okay, where were you the last 3 days? And your phone will narc you out. Also, what have you been taking pictures of? What have you been downloading? What sites have you been surfing, using your phone? The court held that the warrantless search of this man's cell phone at JFK violated the Fourth Amendment, but ultimately denied his motion to suppress because the court concluded that the government acted in good faith. But again, keep in mind that going forward, they're now on notice that they need to have a warrant and probable cause. The court also held that border searches of electronic devices burdened core First Amendment rights, including freedom of speech, religion, association, and the press. In reaching that conclusion, the court relied on records obtained by the Knight Institute through a FOIA lawsuit, which describes travelers' experiences with electronic device searches at the border. The court also explained that these searches chill communications between reporters and their sources, again pointing to the amicus brief filed by the Knight Institute and the Reporters Committee, which detailed the experiences of numerous journalists who, when entering the U.S., were flagged for inspection and were required to surrender their electronic devices for warrantless searches. As the court recognized, letting border agents freely rifle through journalists' work product and communications whenever they cross the border would pose an intolerable risk to press freedom, said the staff attorney at the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. This thorough opinion, it's like 70 pages, this thorough opinion provides powerful guidance for other courts grappling with this issue and makes clear that the Constitution would require a warrant before searching a reporter's electronic devices. Lawyers in the case came from the Knight First Amendment Institute and also from the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. So this is from a federal court. Obviously, this is not yet controlling case law across the nation. The question is whether the government will appeal this or not, because if they appeal this, it could go up, and then if that gets appealed, it could go up even further. But this has been a concern, and I've been doing this show now basically for 10 years, right? And I've had this channel for about 10 years. I remember very early on some of the topics I did that got responses. And one of the things that happened was I remember discussing a story about somebody who'd filed a lawsuit because crossing the border back into the U.S. as a U.S. citizen, they had their stuff searched. And at the time, the court said, well, again, this heightened security issue these days we have, got to know, make sure people aren't, bringing stuff in. But this court's saying, well, you need probable cause and a warrant. You can't just go on a fishing expedition with everybody. And I read several different versions of this story. Reason.com did a great article on it also. And in that article, they addressed the fact that this often is simply a fishing expedition, meaning that they have nothing, they literally don't have any reason to suspect this person over that person. But for whatever reason, they pick this person. Let's go through your stuff. Give me your phone, give me your laptop, give me all your stuff and unlock it for me, or we're not going to let you in the country, and we're going to detain you because you're here. So, you're kind of over a barrel, and this court says, no, you can't do that. And, I've mentioned before, I live in Detroit or near Detroit. I've lived near Detroit for my entire life for the most part. And Canada is literally just across the Detroit River from Detroit. And so when we were little, I'm talking about little kids, you could go into Canada and they'd simply ask you at the border, where are you coming from? U.S. Where are you a citizen of? U.S. Okay, what's your purpose of your visit? Visiting. And they'd wave you in. They wouldn't even ask for ID. They would just wave you in. And coming back to the U.S., the exact same thing. Where are you from? U.S. Citizen? U.S. What are you doing in Canada? Visiting. How long were you there? 1 day. Okay. And they'd wave you through. Nothing. Now, that, of course, all went out the window at 9/11. I understand that, by the way. I have no problem with that. So then it got to cross the border into Canada, you needed identification. So a driver's license would do it. Just, they ask to see show them a driver's license. But there is something about once you're outside of the U.S., and don't get me wrong, I love Canada, but I know great people and robots who've come from Canada. Canada is a different country. So as you're approaching the border back into the U.S. in the heightened state of security we're at now, you always have this thing in the back of your mind that, what if they don't let me back in? What if they decide to detain me for a while? And I've been coming back where I was in a hurry to get someplace. And I remember years ago, I was doing a radio show in Flint, and I was in Canada, and I had to cross the border and get to Flint in time to do my radio show. And I remember having a situation where I'm like, what if they delay me? This is beyond my control. And, so funniest thing of all is I did a radio gig in New York State a couple years ago. And I drove to Geneva, New York, and I cut through Canada to get there because it's the shortest distance from Detroit. And on the way back, I'm crossing the border back into the U.S., and the guy goes, where are you from? And I hand him my ID, and I'm saying, U.S., citizen. And the guy goes, what are you in Canada? And so I was crossing through from New York. Guys, what are you doing in New York? And I go, I was a guest disc jockey at a radio station. He goes, what format? I go, classic rock. And he goes, cool. And once in a while, they'll throw questions at you just to see if you're making sense. Because if I just paused and said, I don't know. The station had no format. Okay, pull over. We got to talk to you a little bit longer. So again, I'll admit I've never been searched at the border, but I've gone through customs many times. And you're always wondering what would happen if they decided to single you out. And here, the judge says, certain things they can do at the border, but if they want to bust into your cell phone or your electronic device, laptop, or whatever it may be, they need a warrant and probable cause to do it. So there you go. So again, Stephen and B. Demon, thank you for sending it. This is from the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University, KNIGHT. Federal court says warrant required for device searches at the border. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I have not lost my mind. I have it backed up on tape somewhere.